Welcome to Knowledge Hub. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive. Governments use tariffs to protect domestic industries, raise revenue, or pressure other countries. In early 2025, President Trump imposed new tariffs on Canada, reigniting a major trade conflict. Trump claimed these tariffs would protect American jobs and industries, especially in steel and aluminum. He also used tariffs to protest Canada's digital services tax and to pressure Canada on border security issues. The result was chaos and uncertainty for businesses, as tariffs were imposed, lifted, and reimposed, shaking the foundation of Canada-US trade. In February 2025, President Trump shocked the world by announcing a sweeping 25% tariff on most Canadian imports, a move that sent immediate shockwaves through the global economy. The announcement, made during a tense press conference at the White House, was framed as a bold step to protect American industries and jobs, but it quickly drew criticism from economists and business leaders on both sides of the border. The tariffs didn't stop there. Within days, the administration imposed a further 10% levy specifically targeting Canadian oil and gas, striking at the heart of Canada's energy sector. This move threatened thousands of jobs and put billions of dollars in cross-border trade at risk, leaving Canadian energy companies scrambling to find new buyers and markets. By March, the situation escalated further, as the U.S. government slapped global tariffs on steel and aluminum, citing national security concerns. These new measures disrupted supply chains worldwide, causing prices to spike and creating uncertainty for manufacturers who relied on Canadian metals. By June, the tariffs on Canadian metals soared to an unprecedented 50%, devastating Canada's mining and manufacturing sectors. Factories slowed production, and some even shut down, unable to absorb the sudden increase in costs. In response, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, urgently sought to negotiate a resolution. Carney, a former central banker, was seen as a steady hand in a crisis. But even his experience was tested as he faced mounting pressure from Canadian businesses and workers. Despite several rounds of high-stakes talks, President Trump abruptly ended negotiations, citing Canada's new digital services tax as a deal-breaker. The collapse of talks left both sides frustrated and uncertain about the future of North American trade. With diplomacy dead, Carney announced that Canada would retaliate with its own tariffs on American goods, escalating the trade war to new heights. The tit-for-tat measures threatened to spiral out of control, with both countries bracing for economic fallout. Businesses on both sides of the border were left scrambling, unable to plan for the future as trade rules changed overnight. Small business owners, in particular, struggled to keep up with the shifting landscape, facing mounting paperwork, rising costs, and shrinking profit margins. One Canadian importer lost $35,000 when a shipment was suddenly hit by a new tariff, only to find out hours later that the measure had been paused, leaving them in financial limbo. Stories like this became all too common as uncertainty reigned. Shipments were halted at border checkpoints, trucks lined up for miles, and customs officers struggled to keep up with the ever-changing rules. News alerts about new tariffs and sudden pauses became a daily occurrence, adding to the chaos. Many business owners and workers felt they were at the mercy of unpredictable political decisions, rather than the stable, rules-based trade system they had come to rely on. The escalating trade war of 2025 left a legacy of uncertainty, frustration, and economic pain on both sides of the border. The tariff war hit Canada's economy hard. Growth stalled, and the ripple effects were felt across nearly every sector. Factories that once bustled with activity now stood eerily silent, their gates locked and production lines halted. The uncertainty sent shockwaves through boardrooms and shop floors alike, as business owners scrambled to make sense of the new reality. Exports to the U.S., Canada's largest trading partner, dropped over 15% in April alone. Steel exports plummeted by 25%, aluminum by 11%, and vehicle exports by a staggering 25%. Threatening thousands of jobs in communities that depend on these industries. For many workers, layoffs came with little warning, leaving families anxious about their future. The lobster industry, a vital part of Atlantic Canada's economy, panicked at the threat of new tariffs. Even before any were imposed, buyers hesitated, contracts were canceled, and millions were lost. Fishermen who had invested in new boats and equipment suddenly faced an uncertain season, unsure if their catch would find a market. Uncertainty alone caused layoffs and lost business, especially in export-dependent communities. Small businesses, already operating on thin margins, struggled to survive as orders dried up and customers disappeared. In many rural towns, the impact was immediate. Main streets emptied and local economies faltered. Over half of Canadian exporters were forced to take emergency measures, with many delaying investments, cutting costs, or urgently seeking new markets overseas. The uncertainty made it nearly impossible to plan for the future, and business confidence hit new lows. Even the service sector suffered, as U.S. clients pulled back from Canadian firms. Consulting, technology, and financial services all saw contracts canceled or postponed, leaving offices empty and professionals searching for new opportunities. The trade war's damage went far beyond numbers. It shook the confidence of entire industries. Business leaders faced tough decisions, from layoffs to plant closures, and workers worried about what the next day would bring. Canadian businesses realized they could no longer rely on stable access to the U.S. market. The new reality forced them to rethink strategies, diversify exports, and prepare for a future where uncertainty was the only constant. Canadians responded with a surge of national pride and resistance. The tariff conflict dominated the 2025 election, uniting citizens and politicians against U.S. pressure. Grassroots boycotts of American goods spread, and elbows-up rallies symbolized defiance. Prime Minister Carney shifted to a tougher stance, preparing targeted retaliatory tariffs. The crisis sparked a national debate about Canada's dependence on the U.S. Experts called for diversification and greater economic independence. The public's resolve gave leaders the mandate to push back and rethink Canada's global strategy. When the tariffs were announced, the provinces across Canada responded in dramatically different ways, revealing not only their unique economic interests but also the deep-rooted divisions that have long existed within the country. Each province faced its own set of challenges and pressures, and their leaders were forced to make difficult decisions under intense public scrutiny. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford, for example, took a bold stance by threatening to impose a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States. This move was designed to demonstrate Ontario's leverage, as the province is a major supplier of power to several U.S. states. Ford's announcement was met with both support and criticism at home, as some saw it as a necessary show of strength, while others worried about the potential for escalation. The threat quickly caught the attention of President Trump, who responded with warnings of even harsher tariffs on Canadian goods. The situation escalated rapidly, with both sides exchanging heated rhetoric. However, after a series of high-level talks between Canadian and American officials, Ford ultimately decided to back down, recognizing the risks of a full-blown trade war. Meanwhile, Quebec and British Columbia explored similar strategies, considering whether to use their own energy exports as bargaining chips. Both provinces have significant hydroelectric resources and strong economic ties to the U.S., making the decision especially complex. In contrast, Alberta's premier took a different approach, firmly opposing the idea of using energy as a weapon. Alberta's government argued that such tactics could backfire, causing more harm to Canadian businesses and workers than to the intended targets. These sharp disagreements among the provinces made it extremely difficult for the federal government to coordinate a unified national response. Ottawa found itself caught between competing regional interests, with each province pushing for its own priorities and solutions. Some provinces, especially those with economies heavily dependent on trade with the U.S., advocated for a more confrontational approach, believing that strong action was necessary to protect Canadian jobs and industries. Others, however, were deeply concerned about the potential economic fallout, fearing that aggressive measures could lead to job losses, business closures, and long-term damage to their local economies. The crisis laid bare the reality that Canada's regional interests are often at odds, making it challenging to present a united front in times of national difficulty. The political tug-of-war between provinces became a central feature of the crisis, as leaders struggled to balance local needs with the broader national interest. As the crisis unfolded, Ottawa was left to navigate these competing pressures, all while facing mounting aggression from the United States. The episode highlighted just how complex and fragile Canada's internal unity can be when faced with external threats. The trade war forced Canada to rethink its relationship with the US. Decades of partnership and trust were shattered by unpredictable tariffs and hostile rhetoric. Prime Minister Carney declared the old relationship over, reflecting a new reality of caution and self-reliance. The crisis exposed Canada's vulnerability, economically and in national security, due to its dependence on the US. Experts urged greater investment in Canada's own military and a push for new trade partners. Diversification became an urgent priority, not just a long-term goal. Canada faced the hard truth. It could no longer count on the US as a reliable ally. With trade talks frozen and tariffs in place, Canada faces an uncertain future. The crisis has made self-reliance a central policy goal. Canada isn't severing ties with the US, but is aggressively seeking new trade partners and building up domestic industries. This transition will be difficult, requiring unity and innovation. The outcome is uncertain. Canada could emerge stronger and more independent, or struggle with prolonged conflict. The choices made now will shape the nation's future. The Trump tariff crisis may be remembered as the turning point that redefined Canada's place in the world.